So your discussion one is due Sunday, and then next week we've got quite a bit due. We had to kind of move up quiz two. We had to jam quiz two in there before midterms. So next week we're gonna cover chapter 20. We'll open up quiz number 2 probably Monday. So you have a couple days to do it, and it's due on the 3rd, which is Wednesday. And then document analysis number 2 is due on Sunday. So that's a really busy week. So that kind of we had to kind of compress things in there. And then the week after is midterms, right? And your midterm will open, probably give you the weekend to do it. So I'll open it on Friday, and then it'll close on Sunday. And all that's online, of course. Then the next week will be discussion 2, the week after document analysis 3. And then there's the week of the 29th of March to the 4th of April. April 1st through 4th was already a school holiday. So, right, nothing is due that week. Just got to keep up with chapter 24. We come back on the 5th of April, Monday, discussion 3, chapter 25, et cetera, et cetera. Discussion 4. Then you have another light week on the April 19th through the April 25th where you don't have anything due. And then the last week is discussion 5, and then the final exam will be on May 3rd. Unless the university decides to shift that schedule. I doubt they will, considering they're kind of up against graduation as well. But as far as we know, it's going to be on Monday, May 3rd. Okay. Do you guys have any questions about the new due dates? No? Okay. Let me stop sharing real quick. Good morning, Mr. Green. How are you? Glad you could join us. Sorry that the class is all messed up. On Blackboard there wasn't a one with our date on it. Are we in chapter 19 or 20? We're in 19, right? No, that was 2 weeks ago. We're in chapter 20. Right, because we talked about Islam and we talked about the Ottoman Empire on Monday. So we're going to talk about the Safavids and maybe the Russians today. Those are the other 2 land-based empires covered here. Sorry, let me just pull up. Yeah, between Europe and China. Russian Empire. Oh, Mughals. I forgot about the Mughals. My apologies. India. And the Safavids. Okay. So the Safavids, good morning, Nahab, are in modern day Iran. Okay, they're also Muslims, and they, follow Shia Muslims, Shia Islam. Okay, so we didn't really talk about this on Monday. There are divisions amongst the religion of Islam. You have Sunni Muslims and you have Shia Muslims. And the Ottomans, primarily, are, oh, we didn't even get to the Janissaries. We didn't finish the Ottomans. Okay. Sorry, I know I'm all over the place here. Let me pull that up for you. We'll get to the Janissaries. And I will show that to you. So we stopped. Where are we? There's the Janissaries. And let me share that with you. Okay, so we are still in the, oh my goodness. Why won't it? Okay, now we're working. Now we're cooking with gas. All right, so Janissary, the Janissary Corps, I briefly talked about it last time, is this very skilled unit of the military. And they are infantry. Originally, they were slaves. And most often, what would happen is you would have, there was a tax, right, on being non-Muslim in the Ottoman Empire. So if you were Christian or Jewish, you had to pay this tax. If you were not a, quote, people of the book, in other words, if you were Hindu or Buddhist or mystic or any other of the more aboriginal faiths, you got the heck out of there. So, but they would take slaves, and it's an interesting way that they would do this. These boys were taken from Christian families, and they became the elite of the Ottoman army. So what they would do is they would draft them into the army, or draft them into this Janissary Corps. And the reason they chose these boys, right, is because they trained them from a very young age until they were ready to actually join. They were of age, so they could go fight. And in there, the idea behind it was that they would have no outside allegiance. They would not favor one family, one ruling family over another. So they were supposedly, right, the Sultan's personal guard, only loyal to the Sultan, right? Whomever the Sultan was. And so this actually worked really well. It was not hereditary. So if you were a Janissary, that did not mean that your son was going to be a Janissary. But oftentimes, this is a lifelong commitment. You don't see them marrying. You don't see them having children. At least that's how it began. And usually, like I said, they would take these Christian boys as slaves and then bring them back. The Janissaries were known, like I said, for being the elite of the Ottoman army, and they started with firearms, right? They were the first to use firearms in warfare for the Ottoman Empire. Part of that is that you couldn't use firearms on a horse. They trained all year round, and the firearms were heavy, right? And it was very rudimentary. You couldn't really load it and do all of those things and use the firearm effectively on horseback. So the Janissaries kind of carved out their own niche with this. They lived in barracks, like I said. They trained all year round. But the Janissaries become part of the problem. So, right, originally you've got this elite fighting force, and they pay them. Like, they're well paid. They're taken care of. This is the force, the last defense, right, in warfare. We talked about when Mehmed conquered Constantinople. This was his last ditch effort. He sent in all the Janissaries, much to the chagrin of his Grand Vizier, because if the Janissaries weren't successful, they just lost their entire army. So they were very important and very integral into the empire. Where things go wrong is the Janissaries start to exert some political power, right? Over the ages, over the years and decades, especially when you see some of the weaker sultans and some of the grand viziers that are engaged in corruption, they kind of take advantage of their growing influence and they secure the right to marry, they secure the right to have children. Um, and they started enrolling their own children in the Janissary Corps, right? So the Janissary Corps moved from a very unique kind of Army Corps into something that was more recognizable today. Now, why is that a bad thing? Well, that part isn't necessarily a bad thing, but what happens is the Ottoman state becomes overwhelmed with debt and corruption. They go through a series of recessions, right? Perfectly normal for the economic time period, and the Janissaries are not being paid. And so the last thing you want, if you are Sultan or even Grand Vizier, is a group of highly trained mercenaries, if you will, not being paid, right? So what they start doing is they start granting them pieces of land as payment. So they give them these large land grants. And so the Janissaries become landowners. And then they become, family men. And they start enrolling their children in the Janissary Corps. And so they are gaining more and more power because, during this time period, land is everything. Land is wealth and wealth is power. So the Janissaries become this really mighty force to be reckoned with. And because they are replenishing, right, every generation and they're growing and growing and growing, they become a burden on the state. And it causes some problems. All right. I think we covered this part. Ottoman Empire during the 16th century. So 1500s, they controlled vast amounts of territory, as you can see. Okay, I think that was the last of that. So let's discuss for a little bit the difference between Shiite Muslims and Sunni Muslims. I'm going to try and pull up PowerPoint for you. And this really comes from how power within the Islamic community was handed down after the death of Muhammad. Okay. So let me put in. Okay. So you have Sunni Islam and Shiite Islam. All right. So we'll put Muhammad here. Right. And like I said, he's considered the steel of the prophet. Sorry, I'm trying to do multiple things. Same time. All right, so after Muhammad dies, right, the community is, the Ummah is trying to decide who's going to hold the power, who is going to lead the community. Okay, and so you have the first four successors, and where things start to split, right? And they call him Caliph. And Abu Bakr is the first Caliph following Muhammad. So let me add another. Right? So we have, and their community is called the Ummah. I'm sorry, I should have specified that. Now, the difference between Sunni and Shia, mostly, is that, and again, this is just basics, right? Is that following Muhammad, the Shia Muslims believe that it should be a family lineage. In other words, they believe that Ali, who was Muhammad's son-in-law, should have succeeded him as caliph. All right. The Sunni Muslims believe that it is whoever can lead the community the best should be the successor to Muhammad. So you have a very secular, practical view of who should be leading the Muslim community, and then you have a very monarchical view, right? That the Prophet's teachings will flow through his bloodline. Let's see. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm going to. Sorry. Yeah, the successor to Muhammad is a central issue that splits the Muslim community. Oh, come on. It's Abu Bakr, and there's three more. My goodness, I used to know them by heart, and now I can't. The four successors to Muhammad. I'm just all over the place today. My apologies. Yeah, we know it was Abu Bakr. Abu Bakr is usually known as the military caliph. He expanded and brought all of Arabia under Islam and into the caliphate, right? And the caliphate is what they called the Islamic State at the time. Umar is the second one. There we go. After he passes, you have Umar, and then Osman and Ali. Now, like I said, Ali is actually related to Muhammad. He's his son-in-law. He married his daughter Fatima. The Sunni branch believed that Abu Bakr should have been or should be the successor to Muhammad. He had a lot of military experience. He lived very closely with Muhammad, and he was somewhat elected by representatives, and that's how he became the first caliph, right? Unfortunately, though, like I said, there's two kind of divisions. This creates a division amongst the Ummah or the Muslim community. They believe that Ali, his son-in-law, should be the leader of the Ummah. Again, Ali at the time doesn't make a lot of noise about this, and the real shift doesn't come until later, but there's already this growing division. Umar is the businessman, right? So you've got Abu Bakr, who is very, very successful in military campaigns. And then you have Umar, who is assassinated. But Abu Bakr named Umar as his successor. So now you have another. So should caliphs get to name their successors? Should they be elected by the Ummah? Should they have to be of the lineage of Muhammad? Right? So they're kind of working this out, and it's causing some problems. Umar was killed by a Persian named Peruz Nahavandi. Not that you'll need to know that, but he did not serve very long. He was a very wealthy businessman. Uthman was then elected, but then he was assassinated by members of disaffected Muslims. Ali then took control, and again, Ali, as we know, is related. He was not universally accepted as caliph. He faced two major rebellions. He was assassinated, and his rule only lasted 5 years. So now what happens? Now, when we look at Sunni Islam focuses on the election of the rulers, right? Selection of rulers to lead the Ummah. Shia Islam focuses on you have to be a descendant of Muhammad, right? Or something along that lines. So Shia Islam reveres the family of Muhammad's son-in-law, Ali. Now, the Safavids in Iran follow Shia Islam, whereas the Ottomans follow Sunni Islam. Iran became a truly separate country when Ishmael, the leader of the the Iranian kingdom, his name is Ishmael Safavi, changed it to Shia Islam. Now, Islam provides a tradition of belief, learning, and law that crossed ethnic and linguistic borders. But Ishmael, by imposing Shiism in Iran, set them significantly apart. Shia doctrine says that all temporal rulers, regardless of title, are temporary stand-ins for the hidden Imam, the 12th descendant of Ali, who disappeared as a child in the 9th century. So they still follow Shia Islam today. Iran does. And the Ayatollah is supposed to be a representative of the hidden Imam. We could spend the entire class going over the history of how this evolved. But the main point here is that Ali, their family, the Ummah went through a series of civil wars in which this child disappeared. Most believe he was killed. He probably was, right? People were brutal in that time period. It was not uncommon anywhere in the world for that time period. The only good ex-king is a dead one, right? So, and then of course you need to wipe out his bloodline or they come back. So the idea that this child escaped and is biding his time to come back, you have in Shia Islam, the rulers of the Ummah are ruling in his place until he returns. Okay, so these are the major shifts between the two. And the Ottomans follow the Sunnis, and the Safavids follow Shia Islam. Coming back to, I'm going to stop sharing that. Oh my word. I'm sorry. Come on, Blackboard. Why are you not working? There we go. Okay. Everything's running pretty slow this morning. Here we go. Oh, it looks like we mostly covered that, but we'll bring it up anyway. All right, so again, Safavid Empire, Iranian Empire, kingdom established by Ishmael Safavi, hence the Safavids. We talked about Shia Islam, we talked about the hidden Imam. Okay, so they're comparing now Isfahan and Istanbul. Istanbul, again, was Constantinople that was conquered by Mehmed II and really becomes the jewel of the Ottoman Empire. Isfahan is what becomes Tehran. It's the capital of the Safavid Empire. And again, it says on their right, Shah Abbas I, the fifth and most renowned ruler of the Safavid dynasty in Iran. And it was a widely focused trading center, right? It was part of the Silk Road. And this was the Royal Square, right, is this picture here. It was built over a span of 20 years, starting in 1598. The open space is as long as 172 yards, 555 feet. The courtyard is beautifully tiled. There's a royal mosque in the foreground there, right? So this huge wide open space. Lots of light in the Muslim architecture or Islamic architecture. And you can see that even when they go into Spain, the Andalusia portion of Spain, the architects really use the play on light to make very open and flowing palaces and mosques and market. And they use a lot of water play, so they play with water and light, a lot of fountains. It also helps to cool the place down, right? And there's a palace on the left with a second-story porch for reviewing troops, watching them play polo. And then Istanbul was surrounded by walls, but those were left over from the Byzantine Empire or the Romans. Right? You had large buildings, ports full of large ships, lots of European merchants. So Istanbul is also a big trading center, but you're going to see more maritime trade with Istanbul because of their location, where they are. Whereas Isfahan is a multicultural trading center as well, but it is more landlocked, right? More centrally located. So they actually trade more with our next empire. Now, what happens to the Safavids? What brings them down? They all have issues, right? The Ottomans outlast most of them. The Ottoman Empire lasts until the end of the First World War, but it's really kind of just barely hanging on for the last 200 years or the last 100 years leading up to the First World War. They nickname it the sick man of Europe. People are trying to prop up this large empire because they're trading with them. The Safavids, though, also have their own set of problems. They had problems finding money to pay their troops. They were constantly having to put money into technology and development to hold off the Ottomans, right? Because the Ottomans were always expanding. Now, the Uzbeks were also a problem for them. The Uzbeks are Turkish rulers who had succeeded the Timurids on Iran's Central Asian frontier. Warriors from nomadic groups were not inclined to trade their bows for firearms. And again, Shah Abbas kind of takes a note from the Janissaries and creates a slave corps. They have an economic issue in the late 16th century. And the Silk Road, the Silk monopoly, really fades after Shah Abbas's death in 1629. As a result, the later Shahs could not afford to sustain their bureaucracy and their armed forces. And you see attacks on all sides at that point. So Ottomans, much more stable and longer lasting. But Isfahan and the Safavids really kind of set the basis for modern day Iran. All right. So moving on to our next. Hold on. Let me make sure we're good on time. Yeah. Moving on to our next empire is the Mughal Empire, and that is in India. Right. Muslim empire. And if you know anything about Southeast Asian politics right now, I'm sorry, Southwest Asia, it's about religion, right? And it's almost always been about religion. If you look back into the partition, the creation of Pakistan, it was always about the struggle against Hindu and Islam, right? The Mughal Empire controls most of the Indian subcontinent. And Babur is the founder of the Mughal Empire, descendant of Timur and Genghis Khan. But as we know, Genghis Khan is Genghis Khan. And there's multiple ways to spell his name, but it is the same person. I suppose it depends on where in the world you're talking about him. But as we know about Genghis Khan, he fathered so many children, it's unfathomable, and not usually on purpose. Genghis Khan was like a notorious serial rapist. Like, it blows the mind kind of what they're talking about had to have happened, because there's so many people that can trace their DNA back to him, right? So again, we're talking about the Indian subcontinent. So let's see if I can get you a map on here. Good morning, Deja. No. Right, I'll pull up a map here in a minute. What's north of India, right, is the Himalayas. The Himalayas, Mount Everest, Nepal, all of this humongous mountain range has like 8 of the tallest peaks in the world in it. Just north of that is the Asian plateau. Yeah, I had the same problem, Deja. Or the plains, the steppes of Asia. So you have this, it looks a lot like the Midwest, right? So you have Nepal and the Himalayas, and then north of that you have, northeast of that you have China, which is very mountainous, and then north and northwest of this you have just wide open prairie. Looks, like I said, it looks a lot like Nebraska or Oklahoma. And the people that ran that were Mongols. And again, Genghis Khan is a famous Mongolian warlord. So they bring a lot of this in there, right? And so Babur founds the Mughal Empire. He's Muslim. Akbar is his descendant. He is the most illustrious sultan. People know about him. He has the most writing. And one of the things that made him different is that he was curious. He was intellectually curious. He was educated. And he really tried to work on and focus on how to reconcile these two religions together. He was not all that successful in that, but he was Muslim and he married a Hindu princess, or he married a very wealthy Hindu. It would be our version of a princess, right? And the point for that was that all the successors to Akbar would be both, would be Hindu and Muslim. That was what he was trying to do. Didn't always work, right? as we know, it actually did not work. But other people in the kingdom, there were land grants given in return for service. Again, Hindus, theistic faith. So, I'm sorry, polytheistic. They believe in many gods. They have 5 main gods, but there are multiple gods in their faith. In fact, they are the only religion in what we consider the top 5, right? Most followed religions, most popular religions in the world that is polytheistic. So your major 5 religions of the world are Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Hinduism, and Buddhism, and they're not in any order, right? 4 of those are monotheistic. I mean, Buddhism kind of is, but it's a little different. But Hinduism is the only polytheistic religion in the top 5, and so, and I'm sure we're going to spend more time on it as we get to further chapters on that area. But you have Rajputs, who are members of the Hindu warrior caste from northwest India. The divine faith is what Akbar tried to instill. He tried to combine all of these together. Did not work. Did not work. People were not going along with that. And the Hindu faith is integrated into a series of castes or classes, right? And then you have a Nawab. A Nawab is a Muslim prince that's allied to British India, and the British will colonize India. They will do so with technology. All right. So here's just some pictures. Persian carpet. Persian is Iran, right? The Persian Empire, if you studied it in 131 or in the past several centuries, covered a lot more than just Iran, but its base was usually central Iran. So when we say Persian carpet, that's what we're talking about. And that goes into Russia, which we won't get into today. Now, I'll just kind of briefly, the Hinduism and India today are still locked into the caste system, caste, caste, and this dictates everything. What you can do for a living, who you can marry, what clothes you can wear, what jobs you can have, where you can live, right? All of these things are dictated by your caste. And if you try to marry or break the system or go outside of the system, you will find yourself ostracized. But still, it's still very like that today. Your Brahmins are at the top. Let me give you the other 5. In fact, if you know Dr. Shaduri, she's from India, as I'm sure you know, and she was a Brahmin. But she did leave, and she talked about her husband was not of the same caste. And I'm trying to do. And her mother didn't want to let him in the house because he was not of the right caste. They did not approve of marrying outside your caste. Of course, if you do know Dr. Shaduri, that wasn't going to fly. So she left. That wasn't the main reason, but she has talked about that before. All right. What? This is all later on. All right. So as you know, I do know that Brahmins are at the top. I can't remember all the other names at the moment. I'm trying to find them for you, but I don't seem to be able to pull them up here. Okay. Women of every status, members of subordinate Hindu castes, the untouchables and tribals, are outside the caste system. Untouchables are at the bottom, so you know the top and the bottom, right? And women were always subordinate and still are. I'll pull that up for you next time. Okay. Oh, I know this lecture was kind of all over the place. I do apologize for that. Let me stop sharing. That gets us through the Safavids and the Moguls. We'll do the Russians on Friday. The new due dates are up there. Discussion 1 is still open. What questions do you have for me? All right, please make sure your name's in the chat. You all have a wonderful day. I will see you on Friday.